One of the college essays by Yale this year was, what would you talk about if you have 10 minutes and the full attention from a million people? Hanji has many topics in mind, like why are there instructions for how we can get and buy stuff, but not get rid of stuff? And things like carbon capturing, like food or culture shock, or like work-life balance and attention being a resource. She really wanted to know why there are always 3 seconds left on the microwave after someone makes themselves some popcorns. But to avoid being pedantic, she chooses none of those things. And here is her story. A story about why the heck she is at school and how she does not love it all the time. I started playing the piano at 5, and everybody's goal was to get to level 10 out of 10. The exam took place every year, and there were 3 pieces to memorize each year. I tested for level 3, 5, 7, 8, but never passed level 10 despite trying twice. The truth is that I never practiced until the last week before the exam. The rest of the time, I will be sitting through the 45 minutes of practice sessions every day, noodling on the keyboard with the tunes that were singing in my head. Otherwise, those hours of sitting in front of the piano while not improving will be soul killing. I wish that grown-ups had listened to me because I was not lying about the anger, boredom, and the frustration that came with the level system. But these emotions weren't valid, since everyone else seemed to live perfectly fine with their exams and practice routines. I avoided touching those keys altogether since middle school until 3 years later, by simply listening to music, my heart throbbed again for the sound of music. When I quit, I didn't think that the problem was the type of music that I was taught or the methods of practicing. I thought that I sucked at playing the piano. The most crushing experience was when my piano teacher told me that I had better ears than she did, but my dad said that she was just saying it to make me feel better because that was impossible. But this talk is not about piano or music or talking trash about my dad. Now, if you will, replace playing fast with solving problems fast. Memorizing a piece of music with doing a standard problem with standard steps. Learning music theory with learning matrix multiplication rules. Skipping music levels with skip into higher math courses. And better yet, I suck at music to I suck at math. You might find that the music story I just told was ridiculous, but in fact, you all have been through it. It's just through mathematics. I was astounded when I found an essay called A Mathematician's Lament. The author, Paul Lockhart, was upset that students don't get to feel the magic of maths before the technicalities. We are instead told that it is useful and we should learn it. Imagine that music and color theory came before we hear the notes or see colors. Few people would choose to be artists because they suck at art. And those people who find themselves succeed in class might just be good at following steps rather than having a real intuition for creating art. I came to Millbrook with the wrong reason to do well, to get to the top of the curriculum as soon as I can. After 4 years of reflections, I peeked into a dilemmatic, exuberant, and mysterious mathematics that I had never known before. Please stay with me because this talk is probably not going to go where you would expect. Is there only one answer to a question in math? Different opinions exist in math all the time. Here's a classic one. Which one is better, the metric system or the imperial system? I was a fervent metric party supporter until 3 weeks ago. The metric system counts in 10 and is convenient when we have 10 fingers to count. Thanks to the French, most of the world is under this system right now, and at one point they even wanted the face of the clocks to be intense. On the other hand, the imperial measurement has a base 12 system, just like the clocks. The way I count would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, dec L. Because 12 has more factors than 10, so dividing things into thirds or quarters wouldn't result in messy decimals that would go on till the end of time. Although this change would make a difference in rigorous mathematics, it is more convenient in day-to-day life. Another famous debate is between pi and tau. Tau equals 2 pi. And you might wonder, why can't we just use pi then if tau is defined by pi? The folks who stand up for tau thinks that it is a more intuitive way of looking at a circle and its rotations. So 360 degrees will be 1 tau or 1 turn of the circle, and pi instead is 180 or half of the turn of the circle. The angles in a unit circle would just be as easy to figure out as splitting a pizza into pieces. So a 90 degrees will be pi over 2, but tau over 4, or a quarter of the pizza. The angles in a unit circle will be easier to figure out, and the list of benefits goes more in depth than these reasons. So if you want to support tau, just start using it instead of pi and celebrate Tau Day, which is June 28th. Those two debates are quick reminders of how symbols are entirely made up. Maths happens to be precise and applicable. It does not mean that there exists only one truth. Even research mathematicians aren't interested in the entire field of maths they choose one aspect of math. It also does not mean that maths was intended to be serious. I believe that people invented maths to be a generalization of patterns they notice in life. Remember the time when you finally got something? The eureka or aha, I got it. I think I found calculus before it found me in class. On a family road trip, I noticed the dashboard on our car, and there was a speedometer. The dial was always moving within a range, which was normal. Then I remembered that people talk about how fast cars are going with a single number. So I asked my dad, who was driving at the time, how can we know how fast cars are going when we're changing the speed all the time? He answered, well, it's an average speed. That seemed to settle my question until my first calculus class, where we were introduced to the concept of instantaneous velocity, or the slope of a curve at a point. So clearly someone stole my idea. Similar things happened in my fifth form math class, where because of how the chapters were constructed, new theorems could be figured out based on the previous ones. So there were a couple of times when I would think of a new way to solve these problems, and they were exactly the methods that we are about to learn. These experiences are like wormholes on the space-time fabric that connect me with the titans and legends from centuries ago. Present and ancient minds collide in an intangible form where I was Euler, I was Lagrange, I was Newton. I don't believe that any other subjects could produce this state of being. The mysteries make math all the more exhilarating. In third grade class, my teacher told us that we have learned addition and subtraction. Now it's time to move on to more advanced techniques for number operations, such as multiplication and division. There are definitely more advanced techniques that we will not get to in primary school. I was stupefied, not by learning multiplication or division, but by the fact that there are ways to manipulate numbers other than plus, minus, times, and divide. Those 4 operations were the boundaries of my imagination. Other operations? These words felt like telling me that there's something beyond the universe. I then nagged my teacher to tell me what those more advanced operations were, and she didn't say anything. I now suspect that it was a trick to trick us into learning. I hate cliffhangers, so I would do absolutely anything to answer those unanswered questions which require learning new concepts quickly. With access to YouTube, besides music videos, I watch a ton of math riddles and problems by TEDx, 3 Blue 1 Brown, and Numberphile. However, there's an issue. Those videos don't stick. I remember the settings of the riddles, but simply listening to explanations only did me 2 things. 1, it spoiled the satisfaction of finding out the solutions for myself, and I thought that I learned something when I in fact didn't. Before I took the linear algebra summer course last year, I finished 15 videos made by 3 Blue 1 Brown, who was really good at visualizing abstract concepts in linear algebra and has definitely worked through those concepts himself in depth. There are a ton of professional engineers and physicists who left comments below like, I finally understood linear algebra the first time in 30 years. Evidently, I thought I knew all about linear algebra. But once I had to apply those concepts in my homework, it was impossible to work from only intuition and visualization. Yes, they helped me identify where I was going in a problem. Yet, to do a problem right still requires using a technique frequently and paying constant attention so there are no stupid arithmetic mistakes. There is a teaching philosophy that basically says, just like other animals in the wild, playing equals learning for humans. An environment that is competitive but safe facilitates fast learning because it costs nothing to make mistakes and there is still a reward. I wish that making a mistake doesn't come at such a high cost for us. It is not shameful to make mistakes, and the recent roadblock that I hit was a wake-up call for how sometimes the most basic things take time to fully figure out. Reviewing for my calculus finals this year, I found that there were a couple of theorems that I had a hard time grasping, and I decided to use one day just to understand them. It turned out that the reason I didn't understand them was because of a gap in my knowledge 2 years ago in calculus AB. It was called the fundamental theorem of calculus. It's just fascinating and concerning to think that after getting 5s on both the AP Calculus AB and BC exam, a student who thought that they had invented calculus just found out that they didn't understand the very basic theorem of calculus. This thought disturbs me. How many other concepts didn't I understand when I assumed that I did? This chapel talk is about what I've experienced in my education and how music and math are represented in our value system. It is not a talk about abandoning the math curriculum. Lockhart, the mathematician who criticized the current math education, was not a very good math teacher himself. I'm no educator, and all I can do is to share my stories with learning. At last, I want to share 2 observations. First, adults have this weird logic of making everything important to be mandatory. And kids hate being forced to do something and being told that this is important and their whole life depends on this stupid exam. The second weird justification invented by adults to convince kids to learn is that this is useful. Well, guess what? Kids don't like playing with Lego blocks because they're useful. I like proving congruent triangles. And even though you might not want to admit it, you love the moment when you prove the triangles, but you don't know why exactly. For me, I just want to prove to you that they are, even though things might not be obvious. It is like putting pieces of a puzzle together. It is sheer curiosity. The last thing I need is for someone else to pose questions for me and simultaneously answer them for me. It is a punchline explained, a gift unboxed, and a show spoiled. I'm about to end with playing one of my favorite pieces from the piano exam. I can only remember a 10-second snippet of it. It is quite an eccentric piece, but I like it. My piano teacher was confused by why I like this piece. It does not fit a general auditory aesthetic at all. Now, there could be all sorts of ways that I can justify my preference. It is atonal, it is symmetric, and it is hated by many, which make me like it. The tendency to prove myself different always thrives when it comes to musical preferences. It has the trace of jazz and the trace of not giving an F while being disciplined. So here is the piece that I remembered. Thank you for the precious 20 minutes you have donated to validate the existence of a person and her thoughts in the world. Thank you again.